We have like crowds in Facebook, in YouTube. We're here. Boker Tov. Boker Tov, everyone. So those that are here in person, we'll get started. Remember that a big part of our friends are joining us online in YouTube, in particular, of course, in Facebook and in Zoom. I will share our service on Facebook, which is what I usually do, and I haven't done it in advance, so are we streaming, Zach? Okay. So I hope that you have patience to me for 1 sec. I don't have in. Here you are. I see myself, not my. I will quiet myself. Here it is. I will say, join us for Shacharit. When you connect with us, tell us where you are connecting from. We'd love to know. We'll be happy to hear from you. There is a fantastic idea behind the blessing, the first blessing that we daven in the morning. As we start our day, we say that we have God trust to become the best version of ourselves. Rabba emunatecha. We are grateful for being who we are and for having God's trust to become the best version of ourselves. We're on page 186.
מודעני לפניך, מלך חי וקיים, שחזרת בי נשמתי בחמלה. מודעני לפניך,
מלך חי וקיים, שחזרת ונשמתי בחמלה. רבה אמונתך, רבה אמונתך, רבה אמונתך, רבה אמונתך. מודה אני לפניך, מלך חי וקיים, שחזרת ונשמתי בחמלה. מודה אני לפניך, מלך חי וקיים, שחזרת ונשמתי בחמלה. רבה אמונתך, רבה אמונתך, רבה אמונתך, רבה אמונתך, מתנתך. ירי לי 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 לי. ירי לי לי לי. ירי לי 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 לי. ירי לי לי. ירי לי 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 לי. ירי לי לי לי. ירי לי 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 לי. ירי ירי לי. ירי לי 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 לי. מודה אני לפניך, מלך חי וקיים, שחסרת בנשמתי וחמלה. מודה אני לפניך, מלך חי וקיים, שחסרת בנשמתי וחמלה. Boker Tov, Boker Tov. And as we enter this sanctuary and we acknowledge each other's presence, we acknowledge those joining us in Zoom. We can see your faces. It's so nice, and we can see you waving. We acknowledge those sitting here in person with us. Bruchim Abayim, Boker Tov. And we acknowledge those joining us, of course, in YouTube and in Zoom. We loved seeing your comments. We love seeing you here, acknowledging your presence. And as we enter this sanctuary, we say, Matovu Alecha Yaakov, how wonderful is this tent, this sacred community that we will together. ברוב חסדך בוא ביתך, אשתחווה לך על קודשך בירתך. We turn our sidurim to page 194. ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם, אשר יצר את אדם בחוכמה, וברא בו נקבים נקבים. It is well known before your throne of glory that if one of them be wrongly opened or closed, it would be impossible to endure and stand before you. ברוך אתה אדוני, רופא כל בשר ומפליא לעשות.
Amen.
And as we just finished reciting the blessing for the well-functioning of our bodies, the words that our tradition provides us with, I'd like to invite you to think of your body for one moment. And maybe with words or without words, to acknowledge your body. Our bodies are the vessel, the sacred vessel of our existence. Clay Kodesh. Sacred vessels. I invite you to become aware of your breath. Breathe in and out. And as we acknowledge our neshima, our breath, we try to create the space for our neshama, for our souls. Once again, I invite you to take a deep breath. As we turn our sidurim to page 196 for the blessing for our souls.
הנשמה שנתת בי טהורה היא אלוהי
נשמה שנתת בי טהורה אתה בראת, אתה יצרת, אתה נפחת בי, ואתה משמרה בקרבי, ואתה עתיד לתלה ממני ולהחזירה בי ועתיד לבוא. כל הזמן שהנשמה בקרבי, מודה אני לפניך. כל הזמן שהנשמה בקרבי, מודה אני לפניך. אדוני אלוהי ואלוהי אבותיי. אדוני אלוהי ואלוהי אמותיי. אדון כל המעשים, אדון כל הנשמות, ריבון כל המעשים, אדון כל הנשמות. אלוהי, נשמה שנתת בי, טהורי. נשמה שנתת בי, טהורה היא. Source of all creation, sovereign of all souls. Praise are you, Adonai, in whose hand is every living soul and the breath of humankind. Baruch ata Adonai, asher beyado, nefesh kol chai, veruach kol basar ish.
Amen.
We're on page 198 for the blessings, for the daily miracles. Nisim bechol yom, birkot hashachar. I invite you to try to think about the blessings that you have in your daily life, in your routine. Sometimes we just go through. We don't really think about those things that make our lives possible. And there are so many. We just take them for granted. And I think that the enterprise of Birkot HaShachar is to help us be aware, help us grow in our ability to be grateful, to be mindful, and to connect with this experience of being alive, to enjoy, to find joy in the simple things of our routine. Page 198, Birkot HaShachar.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, who has given the mind the ability to distinguish day from night.
Amen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, who opens the eyes of the blind.
Amen.
And help us learn new things.
Baruch
Give me
atah
space to
Adonai
add kavanot to the davening.
Eloheinu melech haolam, who frees the captive.
And so we extend our bodies. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, who lift up the fallen. If you are feeling a little bit of pain in your lower back, you might extend it right now.
Amen.
Baruch
Baruch atah
atah
Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, who stretches the earth over the waters.
Amen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, who strengthen our steps.
Amen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, who clothes the naked.
Don't stay in pajamas all day. Get dressed, go out, walk around. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, who gives strength to the weary.
Amen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, who removes sleep from the eyes, slumber from the eyelids.
Wake up, it's the month of Elul. Be alert. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, who has made all human beings equal.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, who has made me
Given
free.
us free will. Amen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, who has made me a Jewish, a son Israel.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, who girds Israel with strength.
Amen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, who crowns Israel with splendor, who gives us the pride of being Jews. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav, v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. O Adonai, our God, let the words of Torah be sweet in our mouths, and in the mouths of your people Israel, and in the mouths of your people Israel, so that they know you. Our descendants and the descendants of all your people Israel may know you by studying your Torah for its own sake. Blessed are you, Adonai, who teaches Torah to your people Israel. Baruch atah Adonai, amelamed Torah le'amo Israel.
These are things that are limitless, of which a person enjoys the fruit of the world, while the principle remains in the world to come. They are honoring one's parents, engaging in deeds of compassion, arriving early for study, morning and evening, dealing graciously with guests, visiting the sick, providing for the wedding couple, accompanying the dead for burial, being devoted in prayer, and making peace among people. But the study of Torah encompasses them all.
We turn our Sidurim to page 212 for the blessing for the Psukei de Simbra, in which we try to engage in the work of uplifting our souls.
Baruch Shemot v'haya haolam, Baruch Hu, Baruch Shemot, Baruch Choseh v'Reishit, Baruch Omer v'Oseh,
Baruch Goser umekayem, Baruch merachem al haaretz, Baruch merachem al habriot, Baruch meshalem sachar tov lereach, Baruch hailad v'kayam lanetzach, Baruch poder Ma'atzil, Baruch Hu, Baruch Shemo, Yai, 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 with songs of praise we extol you and proclaim your sovereignty, for you are the source of life in the universe. One God, life of the universe, praise and glorious ruler. Your name is eternal. Melech me'ulah, ותשבחות, Melech me'ulah, ותשבחות, Baruch atah Adonai, Melech me'ulah, ותשבחות. Page 214, מזמור שיר ליום השבת. מזמור שיר, 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 שיר ליום השבת. שיר ליום השבת. There is an Israeli song that goes, all what it says is, את המנגינה הזאת אי אפשר להפסיק. This melody cannot be stopped. You can't stop that melody when you start singing it. And sometimes when we are davening, we have melodies that just help us go wherever we need to go. I don't know what that place is for you, but sometimes you just get into the melody and you go with the melody and you allow the melody to take you to that place. And as we try to get to that place that we are seeking, we say, Ashrei Yoshvei Beitecha. Happy are those who dwell in your house, in that place that each of us is seeking for, that is in a constant search for. We are at the top of page 215. אשרי העם שככה לו, אשרי העם שאדוני אלוהיו, אשרי העם שככה לו, אשרי העם שאדוני אלוהיו. די די ימבה די 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 אשרי העם שככה לו, אשרי העם שאדוני אלוהיו, אשרי העם שככה לו, אשרי העם שאדוני אלוהיו. היי די אשרי יושבי ביתך עוד יהללו, זה אלי אשרי יושבי ביתך עוד יהללו, זה אלי. אשרי העם שככה לו, אשרי העם שאדוני אלוהיו, אשרי העם שככה לו, אשרי העם שאדוני אלוהיו. Дай 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 я дай дай я дай дай я дай я дай дай я дай я ла 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 ямба ла 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 я дай дай ла ла אשרי העם שככה לו, אשרי העם שאדוני אלוהיו, אשרי העם שככה לו, אשרי העם שאדוני אלוהיו. תהילת לדוד, רוממך אלוהי המלך, ויברך שמך לעולם ועד.
בכל יום אברכך, בלילה שמך לעולם ועד.
גדול אדוני ומהולל מאוד, בגדולתו אין חקר.
דור לדור ישבח מעשיך, וגבורותיך יגידו.
הדר כבודותיך, ודברי נפלאותיך עשיך.
ועזוז
תורתך
תורתך אדוני.
גדולתה ספר נא, זכר רטוב וחייבהו, בצדקתך ירננו.
חנון ורחום אדוני, ערך אפיים וגדול חסד.
טוב אדוני לכל, ורחמיו על כל מסף.
יודוך אדוני כל מעשיך, וחסידיך יברכוך.
כבוד מלכותך יאמרו, בגבורתך ידברו.
להודיע לבני האדם גבורותיו, וכבוד הדר מלכותו.
מלכותך מלכות כל עולמים, וממשלתך בכל דור ודור.
סומך אדוני לכל הנופלים, וזוקף לכל הכפופים.
עיני כל אליך ישברו, ואתה נותן להם את אוכלם בעתו. פותח את ידיך,
ומשביע לכל חי רצון.
צדיק אדוני בכל דרכיו, בחסיד בכל מעשיו.
קרוב אדוני לכל קוראיו, לכל אשר יקראו באמת.
רצון ירב יעשה, ואת שבתם ישמע ויושיעם.
שומע אדוני את כל אוהביו, ואת כל רשעים ישמיד.
תהילת אדוני ידבר פיhi, ויברך כל בשר שם קודשו, לעולם ועד.
ואנחנו
נברך יה, מעתה ועד עולם, hallelujah. We turn our Sidurim to page 218 for Psalm 150. Hallelujah.
Hallelujah, el בקודשו, Hallelujah, ברכי עוזו, Hallelujah, בגבורותיו,
Hallelujah, קרוב לו, די, כל הנשמה תהלליה, Hallelujah, Hallelujah, די,
כל הנשמה תהלליה. Hallelujah, Hallelujah,
בתקע שופר, Hallelujah, כנבל וכינור, Hallelujah, בתוף ומחול, Hallelujah, במיני וגב, די, כל הנשמה תהלליה, Hallelujah, Hallelujah, כל הנשמה תהלליה, Hallelujah, 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 במצלמה, Hallelujah, בצלצלי תרועה, Hallelujah, בצלצלי שמה, Hallelujah, בצלצלי תרועה, די, כל הנשמה תהלליה, Hallelujah, Hallelujah, כל הנשמה תהלליה, Hallelujah, Hallelujah, כל הנשמה תהלליה, הללויה, הללויה. נשמעת כל חי, תברך את שמך, אדוני אלוהינו ברוח כל בשר, תפאר ותתרומך שיחך מלכנו תמיד. God of the first and the last, God of all creatures, Master of all generations, who is praised in a multitude of praises, who guides the world with abundant loving kindness and all creatures with mercy. Adonai neither slumbers nor sleeps, God awakens the sleeping, and rouses those who slumber, gives speech to the mute. And God loosens the bonds of captives, God supports the fallen and strengthens those who are bent over. You alone do we acknowledge. And on page 220.
Ilufinu male shirakaya uleshonenu rina beyadenu frusot kinishre shamayim veraglenu kalot kayalot Ilufinu male shirakaya ולשוננו רינה, בידינו פרוסות, כנשרי שמיים, ורגלינו קלות כעיינות. אין אנחנו מספיקים להודות לך, ולברך את שמך, אין אנחנו מספיקים להודות לך ולברך
ונשבי שמיים, ורגלינו קלות כאיילות. For every mouth will acknowledge you, and every tongue pledge homage to you. Every knee bend in your presence, every upright person shall bow before you. Every heart will revere you, and every inmost thought will sing to your name. Let all my bones exclaim, who is like you, Adonai, O my soul, and let my inner being praise your holy name. We're on page 222 for the last words of Nishmat Kol Chai and the blessing on page 223 for the conclusion of the Psukei de Simra.
שוכנת מרום וקדוש שמה, וכתוב רננו צדיקים באדוני, לישרים נבא תהילה, בפי ישרים תתהלל, ובדברי צדיקים תתברך, ובלשון חסידים תתרומם, ובקרב קדושים תתקדש, ובמקלות ריבת עמך בית ישראל, ברינה יתפאר שמך מלכנו, בכל דור ודור. ישתבח שמך לעד מלכנו, האל המלך הגדול והקדוש בשמיים ובארץ, כי לך נאה אדוני אלוהינו ואלוהי אבותינו ואמותינו, שושבח הלב בזמרה, עוז ממשלה, נצח גדולה גבורה, תהילה ותפארת, קדושה ומלכות, ברכות והודעות מעתה ועד עולם. ברוך אתה אדוני, אל מלך גדול בתשבחות, אל ההודעות אדון הנפלאות, הבוחר בשירי זמרה, מלך העולמים.
Page 224.
יתגדל ויתקדש מרבה, וענבא דברך חירותי וימליך מלכותי, בחייכון וביומכון ובחיי כל בית ישראל, בהגנה ובזמן קריב, ואמרו אמן. יהי שמריו המבורך, לעולם ולעול בעלמיה, יתברך. יתברך וישתבח, ויתפאר ויתרומם ויתנשא, ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתהלל, שמד קדושה בריחו, לעילה מן כל ברכתה ושירתה. תושבחתה ונחמתה, לעמידם בעלמה, ואמרו Amen. And as we turn our Siurim to page 226, you are all standing already. So it's so nice to see the community gathering. And I want to invite those that are joining us for the first time, if you are joining us in Facebook or YouTube, to tell us that this is your first time activity. We are unable to respond to your comments right now, but we later on go into our social media and we'll see you, we will acknowledge you. So please let us know that you are here, and we welcome all those that have joined us in this morning of Shabbos, in person, in Zoom, in YouTube, in Facebook, as we bring together our community, the diversity of our community, to recognize the unity of God, the common denominator of all humanity. We're on page 226. ברכו את אדוני המבורך.
ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם, יוצר אור ובורא חושך, עושה שלום ובורא את הכל. Praise are you, Adonai, our God, sovereign of the universe, creator of light and darkness, who makes peace and fashions all things. We're on page 228. המאיר לארצו לדברים, עליה ברחמים. המאיר לארצו לדברים, עליה ברחמים. ובטבו מחדש בכל יום תמיד מעשה בראשית. מה רבו מעשיך אדוני כולם בחוכמה עשית. מלוא הארץ קנייניך, קנייניך. אור חדש על ציון תאיר, ונזכה כולנו מלא אורות. ברוך אתה אדוני יוצר המאורות. Blessed are you, Adonai, creator of all heavenly lights. ורבבתנו אדוני אלוהינו, חמלה גדולה ותרחמת עלינו, ועבור אבותינו ואמותינו שבטחו בך. How deeply you have loved us, Adonai, our God, gracing us with surpassing compassion, on account of our forebears, who trust led you to teach them, your trust led you to teach them the laws of life. Be gracious to us, teaching us as well, helping us recognize what's the meaning of being mindful of your mitzvot in our daily lives, helping us to distinguish when we are challenged. בעינינו בתורתך, בדבק ליבנו במצוותיך. Enlighten our eyes with your Torah, focus our minds on your mitzvot. Unite our hearts in love so we can recognize your name. Guide us from the four corners of the earth and lead us upright to our land. For you, O God, work wonders. You chose us truly. You drew us near to your great name, that we might acknowledge you, declaring you one in love. Praise be you, Adonai, who chooses your people Israel in love. Baruch atah Adonai, הבוחר בעמו ישראל באהבה.
Amen.
Page 232.
Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. Please join me on page 234 with Ve'ahavta. ואהבת את אדוני אלוהיך בכל לבבך ובכל נפשך ובכל מאודיך, והיו הדברים האלה אשר אנוכי מצווך היום על לבביך, ושיננתם לבניך ודיברת בם בשבתך בביתך ובלכתך בדרך ובשוכבך ובקומך, וקשרתם לאות על ידך, והיו לטוטפות בין עיניך, וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובשעריך. We continue in English on the middle of page 236, and I miss people reading with me, so read with me in the middle. Adonai said to Moses as follows, "Speak to the Israelite people and instruct them to make for themselves fringes on the corners of their garments throughout the ages. Let them attach a cord of blue to the fringe at each corner. That shall be your fringe. Look at it and recall all the commandments of Adonai and observe them, so that you do not follow your heart and eyes in your lustful urge. למען תזכרו ועשיתם את כל מצוותיי, והייתם קדושים לאלוהיכם. אני, אדוני אלוהיכם, אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים, להיות לכם לאלוהים. אני, אדוני אלוהיכם, אמת.
אדוני אלוהיכם אמת, אמת ויציב, באהוב וחביב בנורא בטוב ביפה, הדבר עשה עלינו לעולם בהן. In great joy, Moshe, Miriam, and all Israel responded with song to you, all of them proclaiming, "Who is like you, Adonai? Mi chamocha bailim Adonai." We are on page 240. Yam dai, lay, dai, dai, ya lay, la lay, ya lay, 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 lay.
Ya lay, ya lay, lay, ya lay, la lay, 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 la lay, 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 ay, ay, lay, 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 lay. Lay, 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 lay. מי כמוך בailim Adonai, מי כמוך נהדר בקודש, נורא תהילות אוסף אליהם, נורא תהילות אוסף אליהם, ליי, 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 שירה חדשה, שיבחו גאונים, ולשבחת שפתיים, יחד כולם הודו, והמליכו ואמרו, ילאי, ילאי, ליי, היי, ילאי, היי, ילאי, ליי, 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 ולשבחת שפתיים, יחד כולם הודו, והמליכו ואמרו. Rock of Israel, raise the support of Israel, and redeem Judah and Israel. As you promise, our Redeemer Adonai Tzebot is your name. Blessed are you, Adonai, Redeemer of Israel. Baruch atah Adonai, Gohel Israel. Adonai, Sefatai Tiftach. I want to teach you a custom. Let's stand up. Right. I want to teach you something. I want to work on this. Okay.
By the end of Tfilat of Israel, when we say rise in support of Israel,
You rise.
that means rise.
Yeah.
Like a rise, if you want to rise in your legs, you rise in your legs. If you rise in your spirit, rise in your spirit. But the idea that the liturgy has there is that you are lifted up by the end of Tfilat HaGeulah, of the prayer for redemption, and then by the time that you are in the Amidah, you rise standing. You don't stand for the Amidah. The Amidah finds you already standing up, once again, in your spirit or in your legs. But I just want you to know that I see that some of you don't know when to stand. That's the moment. So let's go once again before you go to the Adonai Tzfatai Tiftach. Yay, rai, 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 yay, rai, rai, rai. Yay, rai, 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 rai. Yay, rai, 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 yay, rai, rai, rai. Yay, rai, 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 rai. Page 142. שפתי תפתח ופי יגיד תהילתך.
Adonai, open up my lips that my mouth may declare your praise. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu v'Elohei avotenu v'imotenu, Elohei Avraham, Elohei Yitzchak, v'Elohei Yaakov, Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Rachel, v'Elohei Leah, האל הגדול, הגיבור והנורא, אל עליון, גומל חסדים טובים, וקונה הכל, וזוכר חסדי אבות ואימהות, ומביא גאולה לבני בניהם, למען שמו באהבה. מלך עוזר ומושיע ומגן, ברוך אתה אדוני, מגן אברהם בעזרת שרה.
אתה גיבור לעולם, אדוני, מחיה מתים אתה, רב להושיע, מוריד עטל, מחכה חיים בחסד, מחיה מתים ברחמים רבים, סומך נופלים ורופא חולים, ומטיל אסורים, ומקיים אמונתו לשני עפר. מי כמוך בעל גבורות ומי דומה לך, מלך ממית ומחיה ומצמיח ישועה, למען אתה לחיות מתים, ברוך אתה אדוני מחיי המתים.
נקדש את שמך בעולם, כשם שמקדישים אותו בשמי מרום, ככתוב על יד נביאך, וקרא זה את זה ואמר, קדוש 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 אדוני צבאות, מלוך על הארץ כבודו. אדיר אדירנו אדוני אדוננו, מאדיר שמך בכל הארץ. ברוך כבוד אדוני במקומו. אחד הוא אלוהינו, בו אבינו ומלכנו, ומושיענו והוא ישמיענו, ברחמיו לעיני כל חי. אני אדוני אלוהיכם, ימלוך אדוני לעולם, אלוהי ציון, לדור ודור. הללויה. לדור ודור נגיד קודשך, ולנצח נצחים קדושתך נלטיש, ושבחך אלוהינו מפינו לא ימוש לעולם ועד. ברוך אתה אדוני האל הקדוש.
ברכו מלכותך שומרי שבת וקוראי עונג מקדש השביעי כולם מספר ויתענג ומטובך כן דד ימים אותו גרד השכר למעשה וראשית אלוהינו ולאבותינו ואמותינו נצא מנוחתנו קדשנו ומצוותך ותן חלקנו בתורתך זבנו מטובך ותנחנו בישועתך ותר לבנו לעבדך באמת ביאנחילנו אדוני אלוהינו ואור רצון תפשו קדש השבח וציונה תחזיין אלינו בשובך לציון מודים אנחנו עכשיו and peace, goodness, and blessing, grace, kindness, and mercy to us and to all your people, Israel. We're on page 252.
Sim Shalom, Tova Uvracha, Sim Shalom.
אתה אדוני המברך את עמו ישראל בשלום. We turn now our series to page 362.
אין כמוך האלוהים אדוני ואין כמעשיך מלכותך מלכות כל עולמים וממשלתך בכל דור ודור אדוני מלך אדוני מלך אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד אדוני עוש לעמו ייתן אדוני יברך את עמו בשלום כי מציון תצא תורה כי מציון תצא תורה ודבר אדוני מירושלים ברוך שנתן תורה תורה ברוך שנתן תורה תורה לעמו ישראל בקדושתו שמע ישראל אדוני אלוהינו אדוני אחד אלוהינו גדול אדוננו
מפיהם יבורך כל ישראל. מפיהם, מפיהם יבורך
כל ישראל. אין אדיר כאדוני ואין ברוך כבן המרב. אין גדולה כתורה ואין בשניה כישראל. מפיהם ומפיהם יבורך כל ישראל. מפיהם ומפיהם יבורך כל ישראל.
אין אדור כאדוני, אין ותיק כבן אברהם, אין שכה כתורה, בין חכמיה כישראל. מפיהם, מפיהם יבורך כל ישראל. מפיהם, מפיהם יבורך כל ישראל.
אין טהור כאדוני ואין יחיד כבן אברהם. אין כבירה כתורה ואין למדניה כישראל.
מפיהם, מפיהם יבורך כל ישראל. מפיהם, מפיהם יבורך כל ישראל. אין פודה כאדוני ואין צדיק כבן אברהם, אין קדושה כתורה בין תומכיה כישראל. מפיהם, מפיהם יבורך כל ישראל. מפיהם, מפיהם יבורך כל ישראל. Shabbat Shalom, everyone. Shabbat Shalom. Let me finish here the arrangements. Make sure that we are all in the right place. This is for you, Gabriel, later on. I'm gonna put it here. So, I think I got it. Not sure I got it. I do. Okay. So, as we were saying yesterday, we are 5 Torah portions away after this one from finishing the entire Torah. And of course, don't despair. Immediately after we finish reading the Torah, we start again. We start again, and that's the reason. We also want to have this idea that the reading of Torah is cyclical, and therefore, even in Simchat Torah, when we read the very end of the Torah, we immediately read the beginning of the Torah as well. Let's do a quick test. What's the last word of the Torah? Correct. And we sing later on when we conclude the service. לא קם בישראל כמשה עוד, נביא ומביא את אמונתו, hasn't come up or stood up in Israel anyone or someone like Moshe ever, and the Torah is saying basically, and it will never be. There will never be someone like Moshe, someone who is able to see, who is a prophet and is able to see the image of God. Now, how many mitzvot we say there in this Torah portion? 74. You're right. Out of how many? 613. That gives us about the 12%. 12%. So it's a bit more than a 10, and it's a 12. So 74 mitzvot appear in this Torah portion. And it feels that the Torah wants to speak with turn off its microphone. It's like when you're about to leave the house and your mother or your father runs after you and gives you some more instructions just for you to be safe, right? Like I every time my children are about to leave the house, I remind them about 74 things. Don't you? I do that all the time. Now, some of the mitzvot that appear in this Torah portion are somehow difficult to understand. you want to give some examples of the mitzvot that appeared? Do you remember? Do you know any of them? Any idea what's in this Torah portion? Let's try to bring it up. I want to share with you about 2 specific mitzvot later on, but just to gather, to pick your minds a little bit. And if you're in Zoom, please feel free to tell us that you want to participate, or we can hear you, and you also can write comments. Pay labor on time. What? Mixing linen and wool. That's one of the mitzvot. Thank you, Rabbi Miriam, for bringing that up. You never understood that. You never understand why mixing linen and wool, it's forbidden. Does anyone understand? Well, tough one. You want to share? Okay, so one possibility is that there's another possibility, and has to do with what are the materials that are used to make the clothing of the priest. And this mitzvah is meant to make a distinction between the clothing of Amcha, the normal people, all of us, and the priest, the Kohanim. Now, this is a very important segue into what I wanted to share with you. And it's that there are some of the mitzvot. We usually say that mitzvot are good deeds, but that's wrong. That's just wrong. Mitzvot are not necessarily good deeds. Like mixing linen and wool. What's the good deed in that? Mitzvot are commandments. Commandments. And I think that it's a good idea to live your life with a sense of commandedness, to live our lives with a sense of commitment and commandedness, to hold ourselves accountable to the law. Now, is to have a notion of the mitzvot a good idea? 100%, in my opinion. 100%. And are there 4 mitzvot defined as good deeds? I see you, Elaine. I will bring your microphone. Are there 4 mitzvot defined as good deeds? No, not necessarily. Elaine, you want to say something?
Bottom line is, there is only rabbinic interpretation of the rules of shatnez. And some of the rabbinical commentators, one of the earliest, go back to, like Miriam said, to Cain and Abel.
Yes.
And the jealousy between them. Mm-hmm. And that there was the son that was chosen by God versus the other.
Correct.
I'm not quite sure what the connection is, but there is and it's connected to idolatry, and those that the priesthood versus idolatry. But the bottom line is there is no real bottom line. We don't understand all the laws.
Correct.
And this is one of those laws. Now, how do I know all this? The question came up yesterday in Miriam's group yesterday. And I said, I'm going to check with my son, because my son checks shatnez. He's got to know the laws. So he started off by saying, well, there's really no reason but.
So that's a very good point. Yes, there are mitzvot that they are meant just to help us exercise commandedness. Now, there are mitzvot. There's an entire discussion in Chovot HaLebavot and the distinction between the mitzvot that we see for them a very clear outcome. Like, I don't know, honoring your father and your mother. It's clear, like, lo tirtzach, you shall not kill. It is clear how some of these mitzvot apply directly to the society that we want to build. And it is not so clear regarding some other mitzvot. Now, now that you are bringing that up, I want to talk about an additional layer that has to do with the time of the mitzvot. There's a mitzvah that is described in this Torah portion. It's called Shiluach Ken. Have you heard about that? Shiluach Ken basically means that if if you want to take a chick or an egg from a nest, you first need to mark what? Yes, you need to scare away the mother, the bird, assure that she's gone, and then you can take an egg or a chick if you want. So, and what's the purpose of that mitzvah? To save the mother the pain. The assumption is that when she comes back, she won't notice the difference in the birth world, Elaine. The assumption is that she won't notice the difference. And therefore, you send her away, and then you take whatever you need to take to fulfill your needs. But you do that in a humane way. Now, the institution that stands behind this mitzvah, this law, is kama mitzvot. The intentionality that one needs to have when you fulfill a mitzvah. Now, here's where it gets interesting. Shiluach ken, to scare away the bird, or to send the bird away from its nest, is a positive commandment, it's a positive mitzvah. You will go in certain neighborhoods in Israel, and you will see children fulfilling that positive mitzvah without taking the eggs or using the eggs to play after that. So what's behind that? What's behind that I would say, that waste? I want to say that there is a complete misinterpretation of what the mitzvah is. Because Tama mitzvah, the meaning of the mitzvah in this case, is to save the pain from the mother, right? When you are taking something for real use, and not for abuse or for for waste. It is a mitzvah also to visit the mourner, right? And now you can show up to the mourner's house, and when the mourner tells you, "Thank you for being here," you say, "Well, I actually didn't want to be here, but I am obligated. It's a mitzvah." I have heard Rabbi Shai Held sharing that example. Yeah, it's a good example. If the only thing that you can think about is that you are supposed to fulfill positive commandments, and you disconnect the positive commandments from the intention behind them, well, that doesn't bring any good to the world. So, and here's the point I wanted to share, the first one, is that the mitzvot are worth very little when they are not accompanied with interpretation and a mindful execution of them. We don't just do, there's an interesting thing about Be'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha, you shall love. Is that a cyclical activity? You shall love Adonai your God, Be'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha, that we read in Parashat Bet Hanan just a few Torah portions ago. Is that a cyclical action or an emotional one? You are saying both. Very good point. I completely agree, but I just want you to be aware that there is a huge rabbinical discussion about what's the meaning of this Be'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha, because the first word that appears there is Bechol Levavcha, right? But Levavcha is not your feelings. Lev, heart, in the vocabulary of Torah is your brain, is your rational, with your thoughts. So here's the layer that I thought is an interesting one. Is we tend to interpret in our tradition the fulfillment of some mitzvot as a rational act. And I think that we need to make sure that we take also the voices of our tradition, we bring in the voices of our tradition that say, no, it's not just a cyclical one, it is also an emotional one. And when you visit a mourner, you are coming with all your heart. Not the heart, the one that we mean in Torah, the heart of our emotions, of our loving presence. Not just as a cyclical act, but also as what it feels right. And at the same time, without giving up to this notion, without giving up on this notion of commandedness, that are things that we feel committed to, obligated to. One of the major crises, in my opinion, of our societies is that we struggle to commit to stuff. One of the major challenges of liberal Judaism is that we hold on to our liberal identities, that by definition means making choices. And then we sometimes feel or believe that making choices means not to commit to things. So I think that the choice of the liberal Jew is to commit, to discern, to distinguish, and then to commit. One more thing. It's a mitzvah that I just can't go past this Torah portion without speaking about it. It's the mitzvah of Shabbat Aveda. One of my favorite mitzvahs in the entire Torah. Have to admit that. What does it mean, Lashiv Aveda? To return a lost object. Now, what's the lost object that we are discussing in the Torah? What? It's an ox or a sheep, right? Now, you shall not see your brother's ox or sheep straying and ignore them. You shall return them to your brother. Now, I want to clarify something very quickly. It goes from your brother to your neighbor, and then your neighbor to your enemy. And in all cases, the answer is you shall return it. You should take care of it and return it. Now, but if your brother is not near you, or if you do not know him, you don't know your brother. So it's a big definition of what brother is. It's your neighbor. You shall bring it into your house, and it shall be with you until your brother seeks it out. Take care of it. Whereupon, when he seeks it out, or when she seeks it out, you shall return it. Now, on the first verse, Rashi says, or the word italamta, litalem is to be indifferent, to ignore something. He says, you shall not close your eyes. Basically means, because it's tricha, it's a piece of work. Let's say that you see the ox of a neighbor that you don't know, the brother that you don't know, going around the streets. You don't necessarily want to deal with that lost creature or object. So Rashi says, you cannot ignore it, as the Torah is saying. And what it would be to ignore it? To look in a different direction or to close your eyes. Now, let's think for a moment. Don't we know? Aren't we familiar with many situations in which we look in a different direction? In which we intentionally look in a different direction? How often you walk the streets of downtown Fullerton? How often we see people struggling and we can't see, we just look in a different direction. So that's one thing to consider. We don't look in a different direction. We open our eyes when we recognize that someone is lost. And then there is a huge discussion to have about what's the meaning of being lost. And here is something that the Talmud says So first, before I say, two things that the Talmud says. In Baba Kama, the Talmud says about this idea of ignoring it, is that while taking the Avedah, recognizing the lost object or person is a mitzvah, there's a natural tendency to close our eyes, to decide that we don't want to deal with that complexity. And so we close our eyes. And the Talmud says, no, it's a positive mitzvah. You shall open your eyes, you should look in that direction, and you should engage. Now, there's another layer that the Talmud brings that I think is just a, well, I like I remember it. In Sanhedrin, no, what I don't remember is the chapter, so you'll forgive me for not remembering the chapter. In Sanhedrin, the Talmud says, what happens when something is lost? Well, they say you are supposed to take it and hold it. And then they go to one more case, and they say, what happens when someone is lost? They use the word law, something, a bad law, something has been lost for him, and they say, no, he himself or she herself is lost. Ived et atzmo ladat. Someone who is lost. So what do you do with that? And the mitzvah is the same mitzvah. When you recognize that someone is lost, you're supposed to hold onto that person. And I want to be more specific. How do you say being lost in Hebrew? Abad. Okay, and how we say committing suicide? Litaved. Uvdan, abad. To lose yourself, I want to say that sometimes means itavdut. It means someone who is willing to commit suicide, or someone who is struggling and completely lost. And what's the mitzvah in that case? You can't close your eyes. You can't ignore it. You can't ignore people that are struggling and you feel that they are lost. You need to open your eyes and you need to engage. We need to open our eyes and we need to engage, even when sometimes our natural tendency is to litalem, to look in a different direction, to close our eyes. One more layer to that. Different one, something that came quite strongly to me this week, and it's the first time that it occurs to me, thinking about this mitzvah, which I told you is one of my favorites. You know, the Nesikim in the Talmud deals a lot with this mitzvah and what you are supposed to do with different objects and how you are supposed to treat them. So it's a big topic in the Talmud, the development of this mitzvah. But the title of this mitzvah is a Shabbat Avedah. Lashiv means to return. Now, what's our enterprise during this time of the year, during the months of Elul? To return. All our conversations are in the context of Lashuv, Teshuva, return, Lashiv, Avedah, to return that has been lost. Don't close your eyes. And I think that one of the most important symbols of this time of the year is that we are looking at ourselves in a mirror. So what happens when we look at ourselves in the mirror and we recognize that we are lost, that I am lost, and the only thing that I want to do is to close my eyes? When I look at the mirror and I don't recognize myself, and the only thing that I want to do is to close my eyes. So this is the time of the year in which we hold on to that thing that has been lost, which we also hold on to ourselves. And we say, I have found something. And I will make all the possible efforts to return what has been lost. I will make all the possible efforts to be alert, to listen to the call of the shofar, to open my eyes, and to find my way back. Shabbat Shalom. Let's get started with the reading of Parashat Ki Titzeh. Shabbat Shalom.
Found on page 1483 in the Blue Book. Yam Tu, Aliyah Rishon, Yikasil Gabriel Ben Baruch, Halevi Vitzirel, Leah Nachuma, Steve Velasco, and reading out in Zoom land will be Mark Filowitz.
Baruch Hu Adonai Havarach.
Baruch Adonai Barach Le'olam Va'ed.
Baruch Adonai Havarach Le'olam Va'ed. Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu Melech Olam. Asher bachar banu mikol hamim v'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch Atah Adonai Noten HaTorah.
Amen.
Amen. Ki tetzeh l'malchama al oivecha v'natano Adonai Elohecha b'yadecha b'shavita shivyo v'ra'ita b'shivya hashet yefa zohar v'chashkata ba l'kachta l'chalisha V'haveta el tachpetecha v'gilcha el riyasha v'yasita zipraneya.
Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu Melech Olam. Asher natan lanu Torah emet v'chayei olam nota b'tochenu. Baruch Atah Adonai Noten HaTorah.
Amen. Yashakoach. Yam Tu, Aliyah Hasheni, Sayyidul Rivka Bat Shmuel Velea, Lila Pesner, and reading will be Daphna Guderman. It's Vahasidi. Last one was see.
Well, can I help?
Oi,
What are you late?
I found it.
You found it? Okay.
We were lost, but now we're. Yeah.
Okay.
So I'm not necessary anymore? That's it?
Do you see it? Okay.
Baruch et Adonai Hamvarah.
Baruch Adonai mevorach le'olam va'ed.
Baruch Adonai le'olam va'ed. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech olam. Asher b'charbanu mikol hamim v'eten lanu et Torato. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
והסירה את שמלת שוויה מעליה, וישבה בביתך, ובכתה את אביה ואת אמה ירח ימים, ואחר כך תבוא אליה ובעלתה, והייתה לך לאישה, והיה אם לא חפצת בה ושילחת לנפשה, ומחור לא תמכרנה בכסף, לא תתעמר בה תחת אשר עיניתה, כי תהיינה לאיש שתי נשים, אחת אהובה ואחת צנועה, וילדו לו בנים, האהובה והשנואה, והיה הבן הבכור להשניאה.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech olam, asher natan lanu Torah emet v'chayei olam nata betochenu. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen. Yasher koach. Yam Tov, Haliyah Hashlishi, Malka Bat Jorge, Ludmila Tsurlin, and reading will be Nitza Hennig. Behoya.
So while you're looking for it, I tell you something about the Isha Snua Be'ahuva. So the Torah portion starts by saying, don't take a woman captive and abuse her. So that's the first idea. And then, so what are you supposed to do with that woman if you took her captive? You're supposed to let her mourn for an entire month. You're supposed to cut her hair. You're supposed to trim her nails. And you can't touch her. The point is that you really need to be intentional about being and bringing her and having her as a part of your life. It can't be done in an urge. And then the Torah, and as a part, we are talking about a loss for war. And then the Torah goes and says, and if you have two wives, and you have one that you love and one you don't love so much, or snua, hatred, then it says, well, be very careful because you can't benefit the son of the beloved wife, even if you really, really want to do that, if he's not your firstborn. You still need to give the rights and the privileges of the firstborn to the firstborn. It doesn't matter for which wife he came. Now, what's the Torah doing? So we have been talking about the idea of love, and at the same time that love can't stand alone. And then there is a need for the administration of justice. Love doesn't stand alone. There's also a real need for justice. So the Torah is trying to implement justice. But in a deeper layer, what the Torah is doing, the Torah is criticizing Jacob. The Torah is criticizing Jacob. Why the Torah is criticizing Jacob? Who was the firstborn of Jacob's firstborn? Who was the first child? What? Reuben. Reuben, who was the son of Leah. Leah says, look, I have a child. I have a son. Now, who was Jacob's favorite son? That was his favorite wife, was Rachel. And who was his favorite son? Joseph, right? And he gave some favoritism to Joseph, right? So he referred to Joseph most of the time as his firstborn. How did that go? Joseph was in constant conflict and strife with his siblings. Leah felt all the time terrible that she needed to prove and justify herself. Now, in a way, what the Torah is doing right now is saying that's unadmissible. And it's setting laws for that not to happen ever again. Did you find the reading? Go ahead.
את אדוני המבורך,
ברוך אדוני המבורך לעולם ועד.
ברוך אדוני המבורך לעולם ועד, ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם, אשר בחר בנו מכל העמים, ונתן לנו את תורתו, ברוך אתה אדוני נותן התורה.
והיה ביום הנחילו את בניו, את אשר יהיה לו, לא יוכל לבקר את בן האהובה על פני בני השנואה הבכור, כי את הבכור בן השנואה יכיר, לתת לו פי שניים בכל אשר ימצא לו, כי הוא ראשית עונו, לא משפט הבכורה, כי יהיה לאיש בן סורר ומורה איננו, שומע בקול אביו ובקול אמו, ויסרו אותו ולא ישמע עליהם.
ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם, אשר נתן לנו תורת אמת, וחיי עולם נוטה בתוכנו, ברוך אתה אדוני נותן התורה.
Amen. Yamdu Hamaftir, Miriam Shoshana Bat Farfova Esther, Miriam Van Ralt, and reading the Maftir will be Cantorial Fellow Gabriel Newman, as soon as we find it. All right.
Baruch hu et Adonai Hamborach. Baruch Adonai Hamborach le'olam va'ed. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher bachar banu mikol hamim, v'natan lanu et torato. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen. זכור את אשר עשה לך עמלק, ברך בצאתכם ממצרים, אשר קראך בדרך, ויזנב בך כהניך שלים, כל שנים אחריך, ואתה עף ויגע, ולא ירא אלוהים. והיה בהניח אדוני אלוהיך לך מכל אויביך מסביב, בארץ אשר אדוני אלוהיך נותן לך נחלה לרשתך. את זכר עמלק מתחת השמיים לא תשכח.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher natan lanu torat emet, v'chayei olam nata b'tochenu. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen. Go to the Torah. We take a moment to acknowledge all those that came up to the Torah in honor of the Torah and our community. זה מי שברך אבותינו ואמותינו, אברהם, יצחק ויעקב, שרה, רבקה, רחל ולאה, הוא יברך את כל העולים לתורה. He will bless all those that came up to the Torah. in honor of God, Torah, and Shabbat. And I always like to add, in honor of our congregation, the community that we create together with your loving presence and participation. May you find God's blessing in all your endeavors together with all Israel. I have to say, we also take a moment to acknowledge those that are dealing with illness. משברך אבותינו ואמותינו, אברהם, יצחק ויעקב, שרה רבקה, רחל ולאה, הוא יברך את החולים. May the one who bless our ancestors will bless those who are ill. And if you have a name that you'd like to share, we invite you to do so in the comments on Facebook, YouTube, and of course in Zoom. And here you can say it out loud. Just let those names come in.
Ren Gattes, Lisa Marta, Susan Angiano.
May HaKadosh Baruch Hu return strength to their spirit and fill their spirits and their bodies with the healing that will help us and help them find refuah shlema, a complete recovery of soul and body. We pray for their refuah shlema ve'achlama meira, for the complete and fast recovery together with all Israel. And let us say,
Amen.
please rise for Agva Angelina.
בסוד התורה אשר שם משה לפני בני ישראל על פי אדוני ביד משה. שלושה דברים, שלושה דברים, שלושה דברים האדם שלושה דברים, שלושה דברים העולם אומר על התורה ועל העבודה ועל גמילות חסדים, על התורה ועל העבודה ועל גמילות חסדים.
Return our Sidurim to page 374 as we return the Torah to the Ark.
עץ חיימי,
המחזיק עמם, ותומכיה, מאושר דרכיה, דרכנו בכל נתיבותיה, שלום. השיבנו אדוני לך ונשובה, חדש ימינו כקדם. Return us to you, O God, and we will return. Help us internalize that teshuvah starts from within our hearts. Ve'ashevota el levavecha. We're on page 586.
והשבותה אל לבביך, כי אדוני הוא האלוהים, והשבותה אל לבביך, כי אדוני הוא האלוהים, ונאמר והיה אדוני למלך
מלך על כל הארץ, ביום ההוא, ביום ההוא, יהיה אדוני אחד, ושמו, ושמו, ושמו אחד. May be seated. Okay, that's fine. Good. As we come toward the end of our service, we take a moment to acknowledge mourners in our community. And as we ask those that are here in person to rise, please be aware that as we ask them to share the names of those that they are remembering, we ask you in Zoom and in YouTube and in Facebook to share the names of those that you are remembering. If you are during the cycle of the first 7 days of mourning, please rise. If you are during the cycle of the first 30 days of mourning, Shloshim, please rise. If you are during the cycle of the first year of mourning, please rise.
Joe Anguiano.
If you have a yahrzeit this week, the anniversary of someone's passing by this time of the year in years past, please rise. What was your mother's name? Lydia? Lydia Hadesh. Chodesh, the month. Hadash. Renewal, renew. So, now you can support our fellows while standing or sitting, joining us with your voices and or your hearts on page 598 for Kaddish Avelin, Mourners Kaddish.
יתגדל ויתקדש שמי רבה,
אמן.
בעלמד יברך ירותי וימליך מלכותי, בחייכון וביומכון ובחיי דכל בית ישראל, בעגלה ובזמן קריב ואמרו,
אמן.
יהי שמי רבה מברך לעולם ולעולמי עמיה, יתברך וישתבח ויתפאר ויתרומם ויתנשא, ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתהלל שמי דקדושה בריחו. לעילה מן כל ברכתה ושירתה, תושבחתה ונחמתה, דאמירן בעלמה ואמרו,
אמן.
יהי שלום רבה מן שמיה, וחיים עלינו ועל כל ישראל ואמרו,
אמן.
עושה שלום במרומיו, הוא יעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל ואמרו אמן.
Amen. May the memories of your dear ones be always a blessing in your life. Yeh Zichram Baruch. So tomorrow, for those that want to join me, I will be in South County listening to the Klezmatics. It's a mask-on event and it's running right now at 40% capacity, which basically means that there's a lot of people that are going to be there, but it is planned to have a ton of space.
Yeah. And what time does that start?
It starts at 4 p.m. You just need to go to TVSOC TB Temple Bethel of South Orange County. Yes. You need to go to the website of Temple Bethel of South Orange County and RSVP and join us. And I want to share something else. How far are we from the high holidays?
Not far.
2 weeks, Nitza. 2 weeks, Nitza. You got this right. So, what are you doing to prepare yourself?
Many things.
So true, to some extent, those that have a role in the synagogue, well, we are preparing certain things of our preparation, right? Like, yes, we are learning the music for this new melody. We are trying to remember the words of this Torah reading.
Listen.
Like, well, they are all kind of things that are related to the things that we are going to be doing. But there's, of course, another layer of preparation. The preparation of our souls, the preparation of our hearts. You have been hearing me speaking about the Shabbat for already, 4 weeks, every week. And I don't know if what helps you to make your own preparation are the words I'm sharing. Maybe to some of you. But I want you to think about how you are going to prepare yourself. How often are you looking at the mirror and trying to see where you are, trying to recognize if you recognize the person that you are seeing, if that is what you want to see. And I'm not talking about the physical mirror, right? I'm talking about the spiritual one. How often are you checking on your spirit? When we walk in Erev Rosh Hashanah, we'll do some work together. But that work that we will do together in Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur should be a reflection of the work that each of us is doing. Our tradition teaches us and reminds us all the time that we have the ability to grow, that we have the power to become. So let's make sure that we use those talents, that we use that power, and that we celebrate the possibility of becoming, of being, because we are on time. We have time. Let's make sure that we use that time with our hearts and wisely. We are going to turn now our Sidurim to page
628.
628. And for those that don't know, the song Ikdal, the poem Ikdal, is based on the 13 principles of faith that the Rambam Maimonides wrote once. Maybe one day we'll discuss them. 638, you said?
Yep, 28.
28. So it goes like this. Yai dai yada lai dai 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 dai. Yai da da dai dai dai. La 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 dai 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 dai. Ikdal Elohim chai והשתבח נמצא בננת אל מציאותו נמצא בננת אל מציאותו אחד בן יחיד כייחודו נעלם בגן בן סוף לאחדותו נעלם בגן אין סוף לאחדותו אין לו דמות הגוף ואינו גוף לא נערוך אליו קדושתו, לא נערוך אליו קדושתו, קדמון לכל דבר אשר נברא, ראשון בהן ראשית, לראשיתו, ראשון בהן ראשית, לראשיתו, אמור, אינו אדון עולם, לכל נוצר, יורה גדולתו ומלכותו, יורה גדולתו ומלכותו, שפע נבואתו, נתן אוהל, אנשי סגולתו ותפארתו, אל אנשי סגולתו ותפארתו, די 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 לא גם בישראל כמו שעוד נביא ומביא את אמונתו, נביא ומביא את אמונתו, תורת אמת נתן להמוהל על יד נביאו, נאמן ביתו על יד נביאו, נאמן ביתו, לא יחליף ההל ולא ימיר דתו, לעולמים לסגולתו, לעולמים לסגולתו, סופו ויודע תרצנו, מביא לסוף דבר, בקדמותו, מביא לסוף דבר, בקדמותו, גומר לאיש חסד, כמפעלו, נותן לרשע רע, כרישתו, נותן לרשע רע, כרישתו, ישלח לקץ ימים, בעדות עולם, כל חי ויש יכיר, ישועתו, כל חי ויש יכיר, ישועתו, חיי עולם נתן בתוכנו, ברוך אביית, שם תהילתו, ברוך אביית, שם תהילתו. אדוני עוש לעמו ייתן, אדוני יברך את עמיו בשלום. Shabbat Shalom, everyone. Yay, la 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 la, yay, la la, ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la, ya ya la la la, ya ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la, ya ya la la la.
And then we'll be right back. Everybody watching on Facebook and YouTube, Shabbat Shalom. Thank you so much for joining us. And I hope to see you all next time.
Beautiful.
Oh, it's neat.